After I got out of the hospital, I finally got to look at my incision. They made a vertical one instead of a regular horizontal one, and I had never felt so unattractive. Apparently, my husband thought so too. My childhood was tough. During high school, I was always overshadowed by my sister, whom my stepdad adored, but hated me, and my mom went along with it. At 17, I wasn't allowed to do much of anything. I couldn't go to the movies, watch TV, use a computer, or even have a phone. Luckily, I did have a secret phone that my mother gave me in case of an emergency only. Sad and alone, I used it to download a chat app so that I could actually have some friends to talk to, and that's when I met him. He was 22, in the military, and became my escape. Everything was amazing. He was so nice to me and treated me like I was special, like I was worth it. Him being there for me when I had nobody else was enough for me to forget all of the bad things that I dealt with in my life. He was going to be my future. We were going to build a life together, and I couldn't wait. For the rest of my senior year of high school, all I could think about was graduating and moving to North Carolina to be with him. When school was over, I moved. We were finally together, and he wanted to get married as quickly as possible. I always joked that he asked me to marry him so he could just get out of the dorm rooms on base. Getting married in the military has its benefits, and getting out of the dorms is one of them. It seemed a little fast, but I thought I was in love with him. So, we got married and moved into our own house on base. Life was perfect at that time. We were both happy and enjoying our time spent together. It was everything I dreamed of it being, but that dream was short-lived, and it didn't take long for his true self to show. His fuse became short, and he would get angry at me for the smallest things. Our arguments led to him throwing things in the house, breaking whatever came in his path. I did my best to stay calm, but it was terrifying. Why was he already acting like this? I thought I just needed to be supportive since being in the military must take a toll on him. His job is not easy, but it's my job to support him through it. But it never worked. It was right after our first wedding anniversary, and I found out the incredible news that I was pregnant. First, I was in denial. I was on birth control and was supposed to have surgery that month to remove an ovarian cyst. It seemed like a miracle that I was pregnant, but 3 home pregnancy tests later and a blood test confirming the news, and I was finally convinced. I'm pregnant. I was pretty excited for this chapter of our lives. This would surely lift his spirits. We were about to begin our family. And at first, he was really happy. Or at least I thought, because as I got further along in my pregnancy, he completely stopped going to the appointments with me and was always in an angry fit at home. It was beginning to feel less and less special. This began to crush me. I've battled sad moments before in my life, and he was usually my savior from it. But now, he was anything but. He made everything so much worse. I would try to vent to him about how I was feeling and how important it was for him to be there for these appointments, but he'd just tell me to stop complaining so much. Our son was due soon, and I was still happy with the thought of him joining our world. I would have thought that my husband would be just as happy and involved, but he wasn't, which only really hurt me. His reason was that he was just too tired, but his constant anger and aggression towards me had me feeling that there was more. One day, he left his phone on the couch and something told me that I had to look through it. I needed to find out why he now acts so viciously towards me. To my horror, I learned that my husband was in fact talking to 2 other women behind my back. All of the arguments, venting, and struggles to get him to our appointments now made sense. I confronted him, only to have him shove me while we were arguing about it. He blamed me for his actions, saying it was my fault that he needed to turn to other women for attention. I should have left right then, but I didn't because I wanted him in our son's life. 2 weeks before my son's due date, I was having excruciating pain in my left side, where my ovarian cyst was. I rushed to the hospital, and by the time I got there, I was sweating, shaking, and on the verge of puking and passing out from the amount of pain I was in. I was sent to labor and delivery, where I was given pain medicine and eventually fell asleep. The next bit is a blur to me. I was woken up by the nurses who told me that I need to sign some papers to consent to a C-section. Feeling shocked and unprepared, I just signed the papers and I was instantly sent to the operating room, where our son was brought into this world. After I got out of the hospital 2 days later, I finally got to look at my incision. They made a vertical one instead of a regular horizontal one, and I had never felt so unattractive. Apparently, my husband thought so too, When he'd get home from work, he'd make jokes about my body after pregnancy and would ask when I thought my boobs would go back to the way they were before. I knew military men joke like this to each other, but I'm his wife, and making fun of my body and calling me lazy was only damaging me. I began to wonder what I got myself into. I felt that leaving where I came from would be my escape, and that my husband was my savior. I started to think that I moved too quickly, and that there was no going back. Through the pain and unhappiness, I stayed with my husband, for my son and for the family. My childhood was rough, and I wanted out of my town, but at least now I was an adult and had freedom. I would think to myself, this was the better of the two options. Shockingly, before my son turned 1, I found out that I was pregnant again. After the first pregnancy, I could only think that my husband would be furious about having another child. But to my surprise, he was actually okay about it. Could this be what he needed to turn the page and salvage what we once had before having kids? As if the first pregnancy wasn't bad enough, the second one was even harder on my body and mind. I was always sick, in pain, and my husband refused to go to any of the appointments. I went to every single doctor's appointment by myself and my son. Being married with a child, I never thought I could be so alone, but I was. Even so, I was still excited for my second child. I eventually gave birth to a beautiful baby girl who shares a birthday with my late grandfather, making it even more special. My husband, being the neglectful man he is, managed to sleep through the entire duration of our daughter's birth. I was infuriated. It turns out that my husband was hoping that I wasn't in labor, and he slept the whole time because he was annoyed that he didn't get to play video games instead. It bothered me so much. Video games are more important than your child being born? They are 16 months apart, and he huffs and complains about having to raise them. Diaper changes, making bottles, bathing, and changing their outfits are all grounds for his adult temper tantrums. I was so hurt and felt like I was stuck in a situation that I could never have imagined in the beginning of our relationship. I was completely deceived into false love. I stayed quiet about how I felt and how terribly he was treating me. But we've recently started to fight again, but this time it's much worse. He has resorted to calling me names, accusing me of being a call girl, and says that he will end himself when I want to leave. If that doesn't work, he says he will take my kids away from me so that I have to stay. I feel trapped most days. I have tried to think about why he is like this. Is it his work in the military that makes him angry? I know what I wanted to escape from when I met him, but what was he looking to escape from? I can never find the answer. I've hit a point where I just can't handle his ways anymore, and I've had to work in secrecy to find a new place to live so that I can get away and get my kids into a better environment. My kids deserve better. I know I deserve better. All I could think of was escaping my childhood, but never thought about the reality of where I was going. I moved to a military base away from home, got married right away, and had kids young. I married someone who promised me the world, but actually gave the opposite. I put up with verbal bickering and nasty comments just to keep the family together, but I will put an end to it. Getting out of a toxic environment is now my goal, and I know it will be better for myself, my kids, and our future. So far, everything is going well with my plans for my children and I to move away, and we should be out of this dark hole soon. My lesson is learned, but I do regret marrying this man.
Hi guys, thank you for watching. I love you guys so much. Please like and subscribe to see more great videos. See you again.